Mic test. 1, 2. Standby crew. 3, 2, 1. Rolling for On Her Side.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to On Her Side. I have with me my guest today, Iram Mahmood. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome to the program, and Jazakallah for joining today.
Jazakallah for having me.
So today we're going to be talking about TikTok. You know, it's incredibly popular. Everyone knows about it. And, you know, with the advent of social media and technology, we have been provided with instant access to information. And that has been truly a benefit in so many people's lives. And just at, a click of a button, you're able to access so much instantly about what's going on across the world. And TikTok is one of those platforms as well that provides information to, more than, I think, 1 billion users worldwide. So the question then becomes, why is TikTok in the news, so much, and there's so much hype about it as well, but then it's also a little controversial. So maybe you can start by telling me, what is TikTok?
Yeah, of course. So TikTok is arguably one of the fastest growing social media apps of our time. And the basis of the app is that it allows users to create content. So around 15 seconds to 60-second videos. They can make longer if they want, but those are the ones that get, the most hype, the most popularity. And so it allows users to create a video, and it allows for them to go viral as well. And so in order to go viral, a lot of people view their videos, they make comments, likes, for example, and someone who's unknown one day can become a global superstar the next. So it's really like instantaneous fame.
So why is it so popular? I mean, there are a number of other platforms as well that may provide the same, avenue for people to express themselves.
Yeah, of course. So if you take it in comparison to other social media apps, for example, Instagram. So for Instagram, you have your feed where you have people that you follow. You can view their posts. And then you also have an explore page where they have posts from all over the internet that might be interesting to you. Whereas for TikTok, their main default is a For You page, right? So this is exactly curated to every user, and every user's For You page is different. It's based on all the data that TikTok has on you and what they believe that you may be interested in. And then it pushes videos to you that you can engage with, and the more you engage with certain types of videos, the more that those types of videos are
keep coming up.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And I think that I've heard as well is that they have these really strong back-end algorithms that they utilize to be able to, more so than other companies and more so than other platforms, like you said, personalize your feed. And I think that that's what users like, and that's what appeals to them and draws them to TikTok. So there must be some benefits to it. What do you think are some benefits?
Yeah, so I think that one thing that's very telling of our modern society is how TikTok is used for people to launch their careers. So, according to a research article I was reading from Amity University in India, a lot of people have built a fan base on TikTok, and then they've carried that on to either other social media apps or other businesses. And so through that, they make livings. They might have brand partnerships where brands reach out to them. They ask them to promote their brands on TikTok, and so through that they make money, and that's a very popular phenomenon these days.
Yeah, and I think also, in general, I've heard people talk about how individuals who have, who are self-employed maybe, and they have businesses, have taken to TikTok to promote their brand as well. So, for example, if you're a real estate agent, you might utilize TikTok to be able to showcase some of the properties and things like that. And because of the audience, the audience is so vast, and it's such a huge market of potential consumers and clients out there, that people can do very well sometimes with that. as well.
Yeah, that's a great point you bring up. And I think that it's also very great for small businesses where they get a global audience.
Yeah.
For example, if they're an Etsy owner, then they can show lots of different people what their business is about. And it's really just free marketing. You know, there's a lot more audience and engagement you can get through these very short 30-second videos than you can through like a billboard on a highway. So, you know, it's very like fast fame and a lot of
And easy on the budget too, probably. Right?
Exactly,
It doesn't
yes,
maybe
because it's
cost
free.
as much as well. Yeah. But speaking of content, like you know, this type of content where small businesses and individuals who are self-employed perhaps are able to market their brands. There's also, you know, there's also a huge awareness of how TikTok continues perhaps to host some very dangerous content and some very destructive content as well, perhaps, you know, geared towards the naive user or the youth viewers, etc. And maybe you can talk a little bit about the challenges that oftentimes we hear about that go viral out of TikTok.
Yes, exactly. So there's lots of different challenges, and I think one of the main things about TikTok is that the point of TikTok is that it wants you to stay there and it wants you to keep scrolling and keep viewing all these different things. And so it becomes very addictive, and especially to vulnerable audiences. So, for example, children. And although children under 13 aren't really allowed, there's statistics out there. So, for example, from The Guardian, where 1.4 million children under the age of 13 are still on this app.
Yeah.
So, although they have those age limits,
They're not policing the age.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, as we know, children are very susceptible. And, you know, for example, there's things like peer pressure where they want to do exactly what the rest of their peers are doing.
Yeah.
And so they become very impressionable to these different challenges, and they want to do them as well.
Yeah.
And they could potentially become very harmful.
Is that whole concept of FOMO too, right? Like the fear of missing out and the need to be relevant. So it's kind of like, okay, well, if all your friends are talking about some viral challenge that's going on TikTok these days, and you have no idea what it is because you're not on it, the first thing you'd want to do as a teenager probably is to go on TikTok to find out what it is so that you can have that meaningful conversation with your peers, right? I've also heard in the news that there's these viral challenges that are, you know, that are crazy, hyped up on TikTok, and they are they've actually taken the lives of some youth and some children. You may have heard about blackout challenges, and there's other kinds as well that are just so horrific and they're so destructive, yet they go viral. And this is exactly what you were saying before, is that there's no age policing. So if you've got somebody who is a youth who is so susceptible to what they're absorbing, they don't have that and they don't have that oversight perhaps, you know, of what they are accessing from their homes or their families, their parents or guardians, and they're incredibly open and vulnerable to the world of TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. And through the Guardian article I was talking about before, the actual algorithm of TikTok, it takes the vulnerability of these children and it takes like exactly what they would be interested in, right? So it profiles them. It says, okay, well, these are young children, they're impressionable, and this is the kind of things that they're interested in. So it doesn't filter for good content or bad content. It just says that they're just interested in this. So if they're interested in this, let's just push this as much as we can.
Show them more of it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think you were telling me before as well is that there's this statistic or something about how when a teenager perhaps opens up a new account. You were talking about that?
Yeah, so in the CNN, they found that within the first couple of minutes of teens making their TikTok accounts, they're pushed videos of suicide or of eating disorders. So it's, you know, they just profile you. They say that, okay, maybe this is a teen and this is what they might be interested in and this is what will bring the most engagement to our app. This is what will keep them here the longest. It doesn't matter if it's good for them.
Yeah.
It doesn't care about their mental health. It doesn't care about their safety.
Yeah.
Just cares about how long will they stay on my app and
Yeah.
how much will they bring to this app? How much engagement will they bring?
And I actually read that it says that it is addictive by design. it is created to be addictive by design. So to say that, you go on TikTok and then you end up spending so much time because you're just scrolling and swiping and it's just so interesting and you keep seeing all of this really engaging material, and eventually you just become so addicted that you want to open up your phone and go through TikTok like every day or whatever it is. Of course it's going to addict you, because that's what their whole purpose is, to do that, right? And the other thing that really, genuinely baffles me. So in the olden days, there was a time when you had to go to school, you had to get educated, you probably had some higher education goals as well that you wanted to pursue. And then you would have some skills and training and you would get a good job. And once you landed that good job, the money would start to come in and you would lead a good lifestyle. But I think with the advent of TikTok and other such platforms, pretty much anyone, like you said, can get up one day, decide that this is what they're interested in, be it fashion or hairstyles or travel or whatever it is. Even like the food that they eat could be a topic. And they could start to make some content related to that hobby or whatever it is, and gain viewers, gain followers, engage with the audience, and start to make money. And then eventually it can become a source of living for you. But what has happened now is that you've lost out on all of that education. You have no skills or training that are real life skills, or, how long is this bubble going to last? Is it sustainable for the rest of your life? And not to mention, education cannot be replaced by TikTok, right? So your brain hasn't developed to that level. You've pretty much just sort of content with wasting your mind and your brain cells that are never going to regenerate.
Exactly. And, going to school, you learn those skills of critical thinking and really understanding what is the truth and what is not the truth,
Yeah.
and really differentiating those
Yes.
things. So even if you do go on a news article or any social media app, you can kind of differentiate
Yes.
like what's true and what's not. But for a generation that's raised on TikTok, they're not developing those critical thinking skills. They're just constantly consuming, and there's no reply from them. There's no pushback, right? And it's just consuming everything that they see and taking it all for fact.
Yeah. And I think you were talking about misinformation as well that's on TikTok, right?
Yeah, so the CNN has actually found that anything that someone searches on TikTok, within the first couple of videos that show up, there's definitely bound to be misinformation. I believe that it's quite concerning, considering how we were previously talking about the fact that, this whole Generation Z, has been raised on TikTok. And I believe you were mentioning that some of them even turn to TikTok before they turn
Yes,
to other.
I actually read this somewhere. So one thing I read was 50% of the creators on TikTok are Gen Z.
Mm-hmm.
And 40% of Gen Z users who are on TikTok say that they use TikTok as their primary search engine over Google. So if they have anything that they want to find out about, they actually turn to TikTok for that information.
Yeah, and I think I don't know too much about Google and like their algorithms behind that, but there's definitely more, because as you can search something on Google, you usually come with reputable sources. There's sources from Google Scholar, there's sources from different news channels. But when you go on TikTok, it's just anyone from across the world. You don't
And it
know
could
their
very well be
credentials.
their opinion
Exactly.
on that matter, right? It's not necessarily fact. But like you said, if you've never honed in on those critical skills to be able to discern fact from fiction, or you're simply too young to be able to do that, opening up this world on TikTok, this global audience, and this wealth of information that exists on TikTok is detrimental to you, because it's literally, you're just absorbing and absorbing and absorbing, and you have no way of discerning what's right, what's wrong. So you could be completely forming an image of in your mind of what reality is, when it's exactly not that, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to say too, you mentioned in the beginning, so it's short videos, right, that people are making. I read somewhere that the average video on TikTok is 21 to 34 seconds long. So I'm wondering, when you're watching these 20-second videos, and possibly for even a shorter time, if you don't like it, you just, you move on, what kind of time and ability are you giving your mind to firstly absorb that content and secondly respond to it. So you're actually, it's one-way traffic. You're simply just absorbing and absorbing and absorbing. You have no time to respond. You have no time to think about, do I even agree with this? Is this correct? Nothing like that is happening. And you're literally spending hours doing this every day. And for Gen Z users, it's what you've known. You're not reading books or reading the newspaper or watching documentaries or anything like that. You're watching videos on TikTok.
Yes, exactly. And I think that there's something to be said about the fact that with these short videos, that really affects your short-term memory, right? And how much can you actually retain of this information, and how much can you sort through it as well? And for TikTok, as you're scrolling, you're not just viewing videos with one topic. You're viewing videos with many different exactly, many different topics, and so you have so much information in your head, and you don't have any way to sort through it
and discard because it's too fast.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And you're not going to search up, every 30-second video you see. You're not going to search up if it's true.
Is this not true? Yes.
Exactly.
You're just going to take people's word for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that it just becomes how much time you spend on the app as well. And according to, there's a digital marketing organization called Lucent, and they said that TikTok really blew up during the pandemic. And so in March 2020 of the pandemic, the average user spent more than 14 hours a day on TikTok. Wow. And so imagine how much information that is, and how much misinformation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And how it's wasting your brain power, right? You were mentioning about the short-term memory loss, and I've read as well that, and I've seen as well actually, users of TikTok, so avid users of TikTok, do report that they have short-term memory, issues. They have trouble concentrating, and it's come to the point where they cannot read a book. They can't sit and read a book. They can't do their homework. And so that goes back to the fact about what are we using, to educate our new generation. So they're searching TikTok instead of Google. They're not able to do their homework. They're not able to concentrate. They don't have short-term memory. They don't have the ability to critically discern between truth and falsehood. And some of them don't even have an education anymore because they've dropped out of school because they became an influencer as a very young person on TikTok and gained so much and, gained the money as well. And so now they can live their lifestyle.
Exactly. And as you mentioned before, how sustainable is this really, right? And
but that's what they don't know when they're 12, 14, 16, 18, right? That this isn't going to last forever.
Exactly. And because it's all they've known. They've grown up with this, and so they don't recognize a time where this wasn't the norm.
Yes.
And they don't recognize a time where education is like the most important thing, for a society to thrive. Yeah. And so the fact that this generation is what's going to make the future of our world.
Yes. Future leaders, future decision makers, etc.
Exactly. Yeah. And they can't even, read a book. And so I think that's very telling, and that's very scary as well.
Yeah.
For our
very
future.
sad.
Very sad.
Very sad.
Well. Yes.
I was watching this documentary about this girl from Australia who was in grade 10, I believe, and she heard about TikTok from her peers, her friends, etc. And one day she turned it on. She really liked, what she saw. She became very engaged. She started to enjoy it. And she realized that, she could also showcase some of her talent or her hobbies, etc. And she was really interested in fashion. So she started to make these videos and post them on a daily basis. And it really gained traction, right? So she got a lot of good feedback. She got a lot of good engagement. And she started to enjoy that as well. So she started to do this day after day after day after day. And it ended up that she became quite popular. It took up so much of her time to create this content and then to go back on TikTok to view, the likes or the followers or whatever the feedback was, that she ended up dropping out of high school. Okay, so she stopped going to school. Now she's doing this full time, and she started to earn money, and she started to earn good money. And so she was really happy. But what happened was over time, she said she was spending an average of 15 hours a day on her phone or her device, either creating the content or going and looking for feedback or whatever, or also just sort of, environmental scans to see what else was out there and how she could improve and all of that. And it came to the point where she became so exhausted. She lost all of her friends because she had never any time to go out. She didn't have the time to go and enjoy, other hobbies and things that teenagers would do. She wasn't going to school anymore. And she became so depressed, she said, I couldn't even get out of bed. I was in a dark room, and that's how depressed she got. And she was only 16 years old.
Wow.
And it took her probably, I think, years to come out of it.
Yeah, and that's so sad to hear, because this one app, that some people might go to for fun, it really ends up in a cycle of isolation, and it really isolates you from your peers, and it isolates you from the realities of the world and the way that the world works. And just to know that as your career, and you don't know, there's no stability in it because you don't know when it's going to just stop.
But as a 16-year-old, you're not thinking that far because you haven't been trained yet to think that far. It's I think the guidance would come from your elders, your parents, or your family members who care about you, to tell you when you're 14 or 16 or 18 years old that this is not something that you want to, overindulge it and make your life, because it's not going to be sustainable. So I think Islam, gives us this perfect guidance. It gives us such clear guidelines on how we should be spending our time, what kinds of activities we should be engaged in. And, if you just look at the structure of one day, we have the obligatory salat 5 times a day, around which we should be planning our other activities during the day, because Allah Almighty, of course, wants every human being to be productive, to maximize their productivity during the day. And I think there's no harm in spending some time on pastimes or hobbies, even things like social media platforms or TikTok, to relieve your stress, to ease your mind, to engage in some fun, activities and things like that. But I think that anything that does not have any defined boundaries or time limits, and you over-engage and over-connect, then it becomes detrimental and counterproductive, of course.
Exactly. That's a really great point that you just made. Just over-engaging in really any, social media platform, that really does bring detrimental effects if it goes overboard. So especially for a generation that's raised on social media, right? If they're not developing those social skills, going out, connecting with others, connecting with the relationships around them and with society, and doing things to help society, they're not building social skills.
Communication skills.
Exactly.
Interpersonal skills.
Yes, and just and those are skills that you can't develop behind a screen.
No.
And watching other people do them. You have to experience it yourself. And so, as you mentioned, there's no harm in indulging in these activities once in a while, but again, Islam stresses moderation and doing everything in moderation. And so even relieving your stress should not hinder from your productivity in your life and from completing your duties to God and to mankind as well.
Yeah, and even relieving your stress doesn't necessarily have to come from looking at your phone. Right? There's also a host of other activities that you can do. Some of them could be spiritual, some physical activities, social activities that enable you to relieve your stress and relieve, your exhaustion as well, but be productive at the same time. And not, at the very least, if you're not productive, at least it's not causing detriment to your health, physically, emotionally, psychologically, mentally, etc. And we've talked a little bit about the depression as well. And I know that any kind of over engagement, as you said, with the screen in general, it dulls your brain, and it makes your emotions dull as well, and it really does lead to anxiety and depression, because your brain is not meant to be used that way, right?
Exactly. And I think that some people, they take that and they think, well, I've had a long day at work, I've had a long day at school, just want to do a mindless activity for some time. But where are the boundaries to that, right? How long are you going to be mindless for before you
You pick
engage
up
in
again and
something
you move
else?
on with your day. So yeah,
Exactly.
I think the bottom line is just that um, if you do engage with social media or with TikTok in moderation, you are not passive, but you're an active user. So you choose what you want to see. You actively search for those things and you consume that content that, you feel is engaging or fun or informative. And don't let the apps control you, right? Don't let them feed you what they want to feed you. Decide what you want to absorb and what you want to consume as content.
Exactly. And it's important to use those skills and those critical thinking skills to go back and really reflect on what you're consuming in the first place.
Yeah, and
Even
become
if,
more aware.
exactly,
Yeah,
even if you are choosing it, there is still some extent to which the app itself is pushing these
it's
things to
controlling
you.
you. Yes, yes,
Exactly. And
yes.
so it's important that we all know ourselves and understand what, because even if it might not become an addiction for one person, it can become an addiction for someone else. That's just the way that these apps are.
Yeah, yeah. So I think just to be aware and to have as much information as you can before utilizing a certain platform is key. Jazakallah for the conversation. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Cut. That's a wrap for On Her Side.